Eric is here tonight from LSAT Demon. Hi, Eric. Eric's the producer of the Thinking LSAT podcast. He's a teacher here as well. How you been, Eric? Caught him in the
I'm
in between bites, it looks like.
yeah, I'm doing well. Was just editing the pod a little bit earlier today. Some good stuff this week.
I cannot hear Eric. Uh,
No,
can you guys hear Eric? Yes, I'm sure you can. Let me just fix my thing here. All right. Let me try that again. Eric, you want to talk to me?
yeah, what's up?
Hey, there we go. All right.
I was
Uh,
just saying we've got some good stuff on the upcoming podcast.
we do? I forget what we talked about.
Pearls versus turds.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That was a really horrible piece of internet advice that was apparently written by AI. I don't know. It had a person's name on it, but it was like so bizarre. I, I mean, I suppose it could just be completely fabricated by that person, but
Who knows?
it's bizarre.
Don't trust
Um,
everything you read on the internet.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, let's see. What do we have going on tonight? Oh, Abigail is now here also, it looks like, from LSAT Demon. Excellent. Which demon plan are you guys subscribed to? We've got live subscribers, we've got premium subscribers, basic subscribers, and a bunch of free students as well. Fantastic. Happy to have you. I'm not going to do anything different or special just because the premium and basic and free folks are here. I'm just going to teach the class that I teach every Wednesday and Thursday night in LSAT Demon Live. So welcome. I see some old timers returning, it looks like, to hang out for the free class. Nice to see familiar faces. Ooh, wow. Haley and Cole are here from LSAT Demon. So we've got extra helpers. You can talk to Eric and Abigail and Haley and Cole. And am I missing anyone? You can talk to us in the chat. You can use your raise hand feature if you would like me to call on you. I wanted to talk tonight. Oh, wow. Okay. So now here comes the chat is active. There we go. And let me just do one more thing and I will be ready to go. Okay. This is why I have helpers. Um, yes. Well, we don't try to stop you from going to law school. It's more like we want you to go for free and we don't want you to rush into it. So we don't want you, like, yeah, we don't want you to go at all if you're just going off half cocked and haven't really thought it through. We don't want you to give yourself a lifetime of debt for an uncertain career. And, lawyers don't quite make as much money as everybody might think they do. And they also, law school graduates don't find, productive legal work as often as a lot of people might think. So we just want to make sure that you're making a smart financial investment. Law schools give generous scholarships for the right LSAT and the right GPA. I wanted to start tonight by talking about how to use our scholarship estimator. If you haven't seen it, it's lsatdemon.com/scholarships. All the estimator does is it takes American Bar Association data, it's consumer protection data. There's this ABA Rule 509 that requires law schools to publish certain data about the students at their school. And we can take that data, which reports LSAT and GPA and discounts. They call them grants and scholarships, but they're really just discounts to law school. And using LSAT and GPA, we can do a pretty good job of predicting what kinds of schools might give you a scholarship. It's just an estimator. We can't promise anything to any individual student. Sometimes the results that you end up getting when you apply with certain numbers don't really match what the estimator spits out. But we are forthcoming about the methodology that we use. And we do get emails from people saying, hey, wow, I just got my results back and the estimator has totally nailed it for me. And we think it's critical that you should be looking at this early and often in your LSAT journey. Put your current LSAT and your UGPA, your LSAC adjusted undergraduate GPA, just from that LSAT and GPA and hit calculate, and it'll spit out for every ABA accredited school. It'll spit out essentially the discount or the price that you would be projected to pay at that school based on last year's publicly available data. We update that data when we get new data, which happens at the end of every year. So right now we're still going off of the end of 2022 reports. End of 2023, they will produce new reports and we'll update the estimator right away so that it spits out as accurate of numbers as we can give to you. Now, the way to use the estimator is simply to identify schools that you might be interested in applying to. And it's not really anything more than that. We advise people to apply to at least 10 schools. We want some schools in that mix that are, maybe we're going to apply to one or two dream schools, a school that if you got in, you would have to seriously consider it no matter the price. For those schools, normally I'm talking about like Harvard, Stanford, Yale. Then you want to apply to a bunch of schools that are like good fits for you. And the way we determine good fit is by price. It's just the stark game that's going on at some law schools. I was just looking at Wash U in St. Louis. It's around 20th in the country. We were talking about this on the podcast, I believe, which will come out next Monday. But at that school, their tuition nominally is $65,000 a year. But only 5% of the class actually pays that. 95% of the class gets some kind of grants and scholarships. Unless you think that it's just like small grants and scholarships, it's absolutely not. It's like 22% of the class gets full or more than full discount. And then another, I can't remember what the number was. Eric, do you remember what it was? It was big.
Sorry, I was distracted by chat. What number?
Half or more scholarship at Wash U. Somebody might
that wouldn't surprise me.
Well, no. What's the percentage of people getting half to full? Sorry, because full and more than full, I know is 22%. I remember that number, but I don't remember the number between. Half.
I'm looking it up right now.
Full. Thank you. I'm curious. It's going to be a big number because
59%.
There it is. Okay. So 59% who are getting more than 50% discount. Sorry, 50% to full, not including full. Then another 22% who are getting full or more than full. So you're looking at, what is that? 81% of the class that's paying less than half tuition. And that's the reason why I'm fired up, right? That's why I'm passionate about what I do. Well, that, and I love teaching LSAT and it's super fun. And I like turning on the light bulb for you guys, but I'm really excited about what I do for a living because I want to help you play that admission game better and not take on a crazy amount of debt that you just don't have to because the schools just don't charge full price. And you can go get yourself the right discount. You need the right LSAT, the right GPA. You need to apply broadly so that you have multiple competing offers. And that's what you use the estimator for, is you figure out what types of schools might be good targets for you, where it looks like they're likely to offer you a generous discount. Any questions about any of that? Any questions about the way the estimator works? Um, I don't really care about in-state versus out of state. When I say broadly, I just mean 10 schools or more. Yeah, I don't mean geographically broadly, but I would consider applying geographically broadly if I were you. Most of you are like in your 20s and you might like a certain area of the country, but you don't have like real serious ties. And there just might be a better price for you out there if you're willing to be geographically flexible. Um, so yeah, I would say apply to at least 10 schools. And I frequently hear from people who applied to 20 or 25 and don't regret it because it just opens up options. RJ, I would not say that LSAT and GPA are the only things that law schools care about, but we are able to pretty accurately predict not just whether you're going to get in, but also your scholarships based on LSAT and GPA. Take that for what you will. Does that mean that LSAT and GPA is the only thing that law schools care about? Maybe. It could also be that LSAT and GPA is correlated with good other stuff. I mean, that's why they lean on LSAT and GPA so heavily anyway. So, maybe LSAT and GPA are correlated with a better resume, a better school that you went to, a more active, productive life. Who knows? But LSAT and GPA, that's the two numeric things that they have in hand. Those are the only things that really fit nicely into a spreadsheet. And when you're evaluating, 5,000 applications so that you can admit 800 people, that's like you want to use a spreadsheet if you can. And that's why they use LSAT and GPA. And I don't see that really changing. Low GPA, high LSAT splitter, that is a thing. And yeah. Um, you can, Eric, maybe you can provide, or Abigail, maybe you can provide also the link to that LSD page for WashU, what we were talking about on the podcast. I mean, that LSD.law, the charts where where you can look at like who was admitted and who was waitlisted and who was denied. And when you look at the greens, that's the people who were admitted. There's just this sharp line right at the school's median LSAT. And then there's another really sharp line right at the school's median GPA. And so does that mean that really that's all they're looking at is LSAT and GPA? Well, I don't know. But it is funny, isn't it? I mean, it's quite a coincidence. But no, the schools they're not, it's not like they lie about it either. The schools are pretty forthcoming that LSAT and GPA are the two most important things. All right. There's too many questions for me to answer in the chat, but my team is here and they will be responding publicly and privately. I am going to go ahead and just teach my normal Wednesday night class. Test J, section 2, question 10. Double-blind techniques should be used whenever possible in scientific experiments. They help prevent the misinterpretations that often arise due to expectations and opinions that scientists already hold. And clearly, scientists should be extremely diligent in trying to avoid such misinterpretations. So, what's your point of all that? Well, it's the first sentence. This author is trying to tell scientists what to do. You should use double-blind techniques. Why? Why should I use double-blind techniques? Well, they help prevent these misinterpretations, and you really should try to avoid these misinterpretations. So because of that, you should do double-blind whenever possible, is the conclusion of the argument. Turns out that that's all they're asking me for, is the conclusion of the argument. This is an example of a question where if you had read the question first, it's not going to help you at all because there aren't any keywords here. There's no therefore, thus, or so to indicate a conclusion. There's no since or for or because to introduce a reason. You just have to think about it. The second sentence has really two premises that support that first sentence, which is the conclusion of the argument. And no amount of keywords or knowing in advance what the question type is going to help you figure that out. You have to realize that they are making an argument, they are providing some evidence and a conclusion. And here they happen to put their conclusion first, which they're totally allowed to do. Makes no difference to the logic. You can put your conclusion first, last, in the middle, anywhere. Doesn't really matter. So the conclusion of the argument is that first sentence. As I head into the answer choices, I'm looking for double-blind techniques should be used whenever possible in scientific experiments. A, scientists' objectivity may be impeded by interpreting experimental evidence on the basis of expectations and opinions that they already hold. Therefore, they should use double-blind techniques whenever possible. A is a reason for the conclusion, but it is not the conclusion itself. B, Zane, there's no difference between premises and evidence. It's the same thing. Problem solved. B, it's advisable for scientists to use double-blind techniques in as high a proportion of their experiments as they can. You should, it is advisable, use double-blind techniques in as high a proportion, which matches whenever possible. Love it. Perfect answer. I'll read C, D, E pretty quickly just to make sure that I know that they're wrong, but I love B here. C, scientists sometimes neglect to adequately consider the risk of misinterpreting evidence. They didn't even say that. They did not say that scientists sometimes neglect this. Not only is that not the conclusion, that wasn't even part of their argument at all. D, whenever possible, scientists should refrain from interpreting evidence on the basis of previously formed expectations and convictions. That was evidence in favor of the idea that scientists should use double-blind techniques whenever possible. D is a premise, not the conclusion. E, double-blind experimental techniques are often an effective way of ensuring scientific objectivity. I know that they prevent misinterpretations. I'm not so sure that they ensure. No, ensure is way too strong. They don't ensure scientific objectivity. Just because you have double-blind experiment does not mean that you are it's like guaranteed that you're going to be objective. No way. E is more than what the argument actually said, so I can dismiss it on those grounds. Answer is A because, yep, they said that, and it is the conclusion of the argument. It matches the first sentence, which was their conclusion. Victor. I think you're muted, Victor. Oh,
Yeah.
there you are.
Yeah.
Hey.
Sorry about that. Nathan, if you could please explain again why you determined that the first sentence was the conclusion, because I didn't quite get that.
So here's thank you for your question, Victor. Here's a quick trick. Okay. If you knew that B and D were both in the argument and you were trying to figure out what the conclusion of the argument was, or if you were looking at this argument itself and you were trying to figure out like, well, the conclusion is either the first sentence or it's the last part of the second sentence, one of those two, that's B and D. Oh, wait, sorry. D is the first half of the second sentence, isn't it? Well, I'm trying to see if there was. Yeah, no. Here's my point, or here's the trick. Okay. We call it the therefore test. You read one of the things and you say, therefore, and then you read the other thing. And if it makes sense in your head that way, then the thing that you're saying second is the conclusion. Let me give you an example. Imagine that I was testing whether B or D was the conclusion. I think, one of them is evidence and one of them is conclusion. So let me read B and I'm going to say therefore, and then I'm going to test D as the conclusion. B, it's advisable for scientists to use double-blind techniques in as high a proportion of their experiments as they can. Therefore, whenever possible, scientists should refrain from interpreting evidence on the basis of previously formed expectations and convictions.
Yeah, that's not grammatically correct.
It's not that it's not grammatically correct. It's not logically correct. Like those two, the ideas don't connect in a logical way. B wouldn't help D. And you're right, actually, it's not grammatically correct. The therefore is the grammar that's wrong, because therefore means, the thing I said first is evidence for the thing I'm about to say. If we flip it, it will become grammatically and logically correct. Whenever possible, scientists should refrain from interpreting evidence on the basis of previously formed expectations and convictions. Therefore, it's advisable for scientists to use double-blind techniques in as high a proportion of their experiments as they can. Yeah. Because of D, therefore B. So I know now that D is evidence, B is the conclusion. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely.
You can do the same thing with the sentences in the passage itself. You can just put a therefore in between them. And if it doesn't quite make sense, then try it the other way around. And you should feel that click where you go, oh, yeah, right. That is a good reason for this other thing. Shivani.
Hi, could you go over E again? It was kind of between, I picked E. Now I know
ensuring scientific objectivity is too strong.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know that these, like, if you use a double blind, then it's automatically going to be effective. You're automatically going to be objective. But what if all my other methods are wrong? Like, what if my sample was biased to begin with, and then I did a fancy double blind study? Does that mean I'm going to be objective? No, I had a biased sample to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's just that E is too much.
Too strong.
They said you should use double blind whenever you can because it will help you to try to be objective, but ensuring scientific objectivity, that the record does not support that.
Okay, thank you.
This test is kind of like hardcore literal. Okay, that you're going to have to get used to. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions. I call them closed record questions. So this is like must be true, conclusion, supported, or you might call it soft must be true, flaw questions, reasoning questions. There's lots of questions that the entirety of reading comprehension, or like 26 out of 27 questions on reading comprehension are all just closed record. All they're really ever doing is saying, which one of these did it say? Which one of these has to be true based on what you just read? And it's just so common that wrong answers are going to be a little bit more than what the record actually said. And E's a great example of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that whole lecture was not just for you, Shivani. It's for everybody. Like we all need to learn that you've got to be, I don't know. Like it's just hardcore literal. You have, it means what it says what it means. And you just can't be picking answers that aren't justified by the record if they're asking you to represent the record. Now, there are other questions like strengthen questions, weaken questions, sufficient assumption questions, paradox questions. There's like probably 40% of the questions on logical reasoning that are asking you to change the record. They're saying which one of the following, if it's true, is going to make something happen. Strengthen, weaken, explain. There, I'm not going to fight with the answers. There, I'm not going to, be skeptical of an answer because it's too strong, because the question is explicitly saying which one of the following, if it's true, helps this argument or hurts this argument. But on the vast majority of reading comprehension questions and on many, many logical reasoning questions, again, probably 60% roughly of logical reasoning, you really have to stay rooted in the evidence. But read the question carefully, because the question is going to tell you whether you want to pick something that is supported by the evidence or whether you're looking to pick something that will change the situation. I hope that was helpful. Thank you again for being here. Really appreciate you guys. I am going to go back to our agenda. And we are going to do a logic game. This is the ship game from Prep Test J. If you're good enough at the games, if you've been practicing for a while, I would recommend that you put me on mute for a little bit and try this game on your own. If you're brand new or if you're new enough at the games that the games are really scary to you, I'm going to make some brief remarks about this game before I turn you loose. You're going to need a piece of scratch paper and you're going to just make some kind of a drawing on your page in order to solve this puzzle. I recommend that you try to solve the puzzle first, then go answer questions. The more you can learn about the system, the better off you're going to be when you go tackle like detailed questions about the system. What are we doing here? We're scheduling 7 week-long voyages for some ship. Each voyage will occur in weeks 1 through 7. The stops are G, J, M, and T. So there's only 4 destinations. We have 7 weeks, though. Each destination will be scheduled for at least one of the weeks. So yeah, we're going to have to go to some of these places more than once. Here's the rules. J is not going to be in 4. Okay, well, I mean, we do have to put J somewhere. It just can't ever be in 4. Yeah, but there's still a whole bunch of places where J could go, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, click the link, please, to see the game. I'm not sharing my screen for this one. My bad. Just click the link and you'll be able to see it on your own. T will be the destination in week 7. So there, I would just always start my setup by just writing T right into the 7th spot. Whether I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from left to right or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from top to bottom, totally doesn't matter. But I am going to have 7 spots and I'm going to have a T just sitting there in that 7th spot. There's no question we are going to T 7th. F, the Freedom, the boat, is going to go to twice to Martinique, exactly twice to M, and at least one voyage to G has to take place between those 2 voyages. So I'm picturing in my head an M before a G before another M. M before G before M. That has to fit somewhere into our spots. And there's only 6 spots for that to fit in because we know that T is in the 7th week. So I'm going to have to see M before G before M somewhere in those first 6 spots. Okay, I can picture it. G will be its destination in the week preceding any voyage we make to J. And that's the rule that if you're going to mess this game up, you're going to mess it up right there. If you write down just like GJ, you're already wrong because that rule only applies when there's a J. It doesn't actually apply when there's a G. The rule says G will be the destination in the week preceding any voyage we make to Jamaica, and I do know that we have to go to Jamaica somewhere, even though we can't go to Jamaica 4th and we also can't go to Jamaica 7th. But when we go to Jamaica, we have to have a G in the immediately preceding week. The trick to recognize there is that J is the trigger, not G. It's J that triggers the rule. You can have extra G's. You can have a G wherever. I mean, you do have to have one between the M and between the two M's, but you can have other G's without J's. You can't have J's without G's. That's just what the rule literally says. You have to think that through. You have to read the rule and understand that it doesn't get triggered by G. It only gets triggered by J. Last rule, no destination will be scheduled for consecutive weeks. I would think about, well, okay, so I know that T is in the 7th spot. So then, okay, T can't go 6th. I might start thinking about who could go 6th. I think I would also be thinking about J a lot because J, it can't go in week 4, can't go in 7 because T's there. It has to go somewhere. And wherever it goes, it's going to trigger a G immediately before it. So I can then learn that that J can't ever go in the 1st spot. If J were 1st, then you'd have to have a G in week 0, but there is no week 0. Any voyage you make to Jamaica has to be preceded by Guadalupe. So anytime there's a J, there has to be a G immediately before it. And it can't go 4th, the J, and it can't go 7th, the J, but it also can't go 1st. And that's the first thing that I would learn about this game. I'm not sure exactly how I would attack it. You could attack it based on the M's. You know, there's 2 M's. They can go 1st and 3rd, 1st and 4th, 1st and 5th, 1st and 6th. Oh boy, I've already got 4 worlds and I haven't even gotten to 2nd and 4th, 2nd and 5th, 2nd and 6th, 3rd and 5th, 3rd and 6th. Yeah, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of worlds based on the M's. So probably wouldn't do it that way. Thinking about the J could work, you know, like there has to be a J somewhere, and it can only be 2nd, 3rd, 5th, or 6th. So it might be worth playing with worlds based on J. We're going to have a Google form in the chat. I want you to upload your solution to the game. I want to see how you tried to solve this puzzle. I'll share back 1 or 2 of the best setups with the class so that we can all talk about them. My team, Abigail and Eric and Cole and Haley, will be talking to each of you about your setups in the background. I don't know how they're going to share out that work, but I'm sure Abigail has a system in mind. And I'll be back in, yeah, I'll give you like, let's say 8 minutes to play with this game, and then I'll come back and answer questions. Have fun. So there's an art to logic games, and there's an art specifically to making worlds. If you're brand new to the idea of worlds, all we're doing is we're simplifying the game by baking in as many of the rules as we can. This game, let me just first take a real wide view. I'm going to share my screen with you again. This game has lots of explanations in the daemon with lots of voting, so you can figure out, which explanations are likely to be the best. Turns out, when I did this game in 2021, I did it really without making worlds, or I solved it in one world. So I knew that T had to go 7th in every world, and I knew that J couldn't be 4th, but I never really started building worlds based on J. I think that these were just me answering the questions. Here is Ben solving it. Apparently he gets to eventually making 8 worlds based on J. That's interesting. Here is Ben, though, solving the same game in just one world, deciding that it wasn't worth it to make the splits on a different day. Then we have down here Matt Dumont, who is in law school now, but he graduated from law school already, but geez, he's a lawyer now. He was the master when he was teaching here. He was the master of splitting worlds, and he apparently ended up in 9 worlds. We got a typo here, Abigail, that I'm sure will be fixed promptly, but Matt apparently made 9 worlds. Here are some slides that Abigail made. This is another way that you can get help in the daemon, is to take a look at these slides, and you can click through. She started here. She started with just one world. This is worlds. This is the world we're living in. Okay. For this game, every solution has to look like this. There has to be a T in the 7th spot, and there can't be a J in the 4th spot. That's the world we're living in. So this is 2 rules baked into just one world. Then she said, I want to deal with J, because if I have J, I have to have G right before it. And I know that J is kind of limited because J can't go 4th. So where is that J? Where can it actually go? And she's realizing that J can only go in 4 spots. It can go 2nd, which forces G 1st. It can go 3rd, which forces G 2nd. It can go 5th, which forces G 4th, or it can go 6th, which forces G 5th. And every solution to the game is going to have to look like one of these 4. So now we have 4 worlds, and I believe we have 3 rules fully baked in. My only question would be, can you have more than one G? At this point, not G, J. Can you have more than one J? But I don't think it would work just based on the math. If I had 2 J's, then I would also have to have 2 G's, but I also have to have 2 M's. Can I get away with just 1 T? That would be 7 things. So maybe it actually works. I would then start looking at my worlds, and I would try to figure out what world might be able to have an additional GJ. Could I do it right here? Could I go M here, G here, J here, M here? You know what? I think I could. So I actually haven't fully baked in that rule about J, because there might be more J's to come. And so I would have to hold that in my head. Eventually, Abigail gets to her step 3 is here, where she's like, well, I could split further. And if, you want to see Matt or Ben or whoever do more splits, you can. But Abigail decided that she was just going to stop right here and not go any further there are still some rules in play. You can't have the same thing twice in a row. Anytime you have a J, you have to have a G before it. That's what that arrow means. So that's actually a conditional arrow. When we have J, then we have to have that G right before it. But it doesn't work the other way around. We also have to have an M and a G and an M. That doesn't mean we have to have an M and a G, J and an M. Because, like in this world, you could start GJ and then go M, G, M, G. I think you could actually have 3 Gs potentially. Okay, I've been talking a lot. Did any of the questions cause you a hard time? Number 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Anybody get stuck anywhere? 17 was tough. Let's see. 17 says, which one of the following must be true about the schedule of voyages? Do I have to go to G in week 1 or 2? I sure don't think so. You know, if I had gotten this far as Abigail got here on her 3rd slide, or I mean, she actually got that far on her 2nd slide. If I had gotten that far, do I have to have always a G in 1 or 2? I don't think so, because there's no G in 1 or 2 here, and there's no G in 1 or 2 here. Like, why can't it be, you know, M T? I don't know. I just think there's ways to do it, right? And I wouldn't even bother trying to prove that wrong answer is wrong. Instead, I would just say, look, if I think A could happen here and here, or sorry, if I think that A could be false here and here, then I'm not going to try to prove that it could be false. I'm just going to assume that in one of those worlds, maybe both of those worlds, it could be false. So it's probably not the answer. I'm looking for something that is more obviously has to always be true. How about B? Do I have to go to M in week 2 or week 3? I mean, not unless this whole world doesn't work. Like, why can't I have M, G, J, T, G, M, or whatever? I feel like there's ways to do that. So because it seems like I can violate this rule, I don't think it has to be true. C, we go at most twice to G. And I don't think that's the answer, because I think I've already thought it through that you could have 3 Gs. I mean, right here, I believe you could have G, J, G, M, G, M, for example. So yeah, there's no problem having extra Gs. You're going to think that C is the answer if you thought that GJ was always GJ, but it's not. If there's J, it's GJ. But there can be extra G's just floating around, and that's why I'm not going to pick C. D, we go at most twice to Jamaica. Yeah. Because if I went 3 times to Jamaica, then I would have to go to G 3 times, but I have to go to M 2 times, and then I'm already out of weeks. I only have 7 weeks, which is why I can't have more than 2 J's, and that's why the answer is D. E, at most 2 voyages to T. Nah, I think you could go to T in, you know, like 1st, 3rd, and 7th, or 1st, 5th, and 7th. I don't know. I think there's multiple ways to do it. My answer here is D. Any other questions? Okay, let's shift gears off of logic games. You can continue to upload your scratch paper. You can continue to talk to my amazing team. If you're not taking advantage of that, you're crazy. There's multiple professional LSAT tutors in the room, and you're nuts if you don't take advantage of their offer to review your scratch paper. This is free LSAT tutoring. Do it. Okay, I'm going to move on to reading comprehension, and that'll be the last thing that we will do tonight. Remember that with reading comprehension, it's really heavily evidence-based. Like, if there's 6 questions on this passage that we're going to do, I would guarantee that 5 out of the 6 or 6 out of the 6 are going to be essentially just asking you, what did it say in the passage? Now, this is comparative reading. There's 2 passages here, passage A and passage B. So a lot of the questions are going to be asking you, like, what was in both passages, or what was in one of the passages but not in the other. Certainly, you're going to look for similarities and differences as you read. That's, you know, you've been doing that in reading comprehension since what, 4th grade? You know how to compare and contrast. So you think about what they're both saying, think about what one of them is saying, but the other one's not really saying anything. Read it carefully. You don't have to memorize it, but you do have to understand what the purpose of each document is. What do they want? Why is this document in existence? The metaphor that I always like to use is I just want you to imagine that you're working in a law firm and this document has arrived. These two documents have arrived on your desk, and your job is to master those documents. If you don't master those documents, you're going to lose your legal battle. So you have to read both documents and understand each of them. Again, not memorize, because you're always going to have a copy of the document, but you need to know why the document exists. Pay attention, follow the story as you read. When you get to the questions, you should be able to predict the answer to like half of them, maybe more, just based on your big picture understanding of each of the two passages. Oh, be careful, please, with your microphones. Okay. I'll give you some time to read the passage. When we come back, I'll read the passage to you, and then I will answer whatever questions we have time for before we get out of here. Enjoy your reading comprehension. All right, let's talk about it. I'm going to read the passage to you, and the poll's still open, so you can tell me which questions gave you a hard time. Obviously, number 13, right now it's running 52% of the class is requesting number 13. So we'll certainly be talking about that one. But first, let me just take a crack at the whole thing. Well, the whole things. It's two passages, passage A and passage B. So I'm going to try to figure out what the big picture main point is of both of those passages. I'll talk you through it. The two passages discuss recent scientific research on music. They're adapted from two different papers presented at a scholarly conference. Okay, lucky us. We're going to read a couple of academic papers about scientific research on music. Passage A. Did music and human language originate separately or together? I don't know. You tell me. It's a rhetorical question at the start of the passage. They're hinting at here's what I'm about to say. I would cut that. Let's get on with it. Tell me, did it or did it not? Well, both systems use intonation and rhythm to communicate emotions. Okay, so did they originate together? Both can be produced vocally or with tools, and people can produce both music and language silently to themselves. Yeah, okay. Another similarity between music and human language. Are you saying that they originated together? Brain imaging studies suggest that music and language are part of one large, vastly complicated neurological system for processing sound. And again, I ask, does that mean that they originated together? You're the one that started with it, passage A, so now I'm not going to let it go. You're providing all this evidence that seems to support the idea that they originated together. But is that really what you think, passage A? I don't know yet. In fact, it says, fewer differences than similarities exist between the neurological processing of the two. One could think of the two activities as different radio programs that can be broadcast over the same hardware. One noteworthy difference, though, is that generally speaking, people are better at language than music. Yeah. In music, anyone can listen easily enough, but most people do not perform well, and in many cultures, composition is left to specialists. In language, by contrast, nearly everyone actively performs and composes language, words. Given their shared neurological basis, it appears that music and language evolved together. Ah, okay, there it is. They finally got around to it. Notice what I was doing there. That rhetorical question at the start of passage A is what got me really tuned in to their idea. And they provided lots of evidence, similarities and differences, mostly similarities though. And then finally, almost all the way through this one long paragraph that makes up passage A, they get to, given their shared neurological basis, it appears that music and language evolved together as brain size increased over the course of hominid evolution. But the primacy of language over music that we can observe today suggests that language, not music, was the primary function natural selection operated on. Music, it would seem, had little adaptive value of its own and most likely developed on the coattails of language. Wow, okay. So taking a shot there at music a little bit, saying, well, really, evolution said you need language. You need language if you're going to survive and procreate and, leave descendants. That's what natural selection was selecting for, was the ability to use language. That's why everybody can use language. And music, yeah, some of us happen to be musical. And yes, they did evolve together because I've got passage A says, I think they evolved together because I've got all these similarities. They run on the same hardware. It just really looks like they have always been happening at the same time. But again, music is secondary and language is primary, according to passage A. Okay, so new passage. New speaker, a little bit of a breath of fresh air. We're going to hear a new perspective on the same issue, or we're going to hear an application of similar reasoning, or I don't know where we're going to go in passage B. It's probably going to have something to do with music and language. Passage B, Darwin claimed that neither the enjoyment nor the capacity of producing musical notes are faculties of the least practical use to man. They must be ranked. Since neither enjoyment nor capacity of producing musical notes are faculties of the least practical use to man, they must be ranked among the most mysterious with which he is endowed. And passage A says, I don't think it's a mystery at all. Passage A says, well, it uses the same language. It uses the same hardware as language does. And so, yeah, the reason why we have music is because we have language. But Darwin was puzzled. Passage B, now, not speaking in Darwin's voice, but speaking in their own voice, passage B says, I suggest that the enjoyment of and the capacity to produce musical notes are faculties of indispensable use to mothers and their infants, and that it is in the emotional bonds created by the interaction of mother and child that we can discover the evolutionary origins of human music. Whoa. Now, that's a different idea. That's not the same idea. Passage A says, yeah, we developed language and then some of us happen to be musical. Passage B says, it starts with the Darwin quote that it immediately then dunks on, because Darwin said music is such a puzzle, like it's not the least bit of use to anybody. And passage B immediately turns around and says, yeah, it's critical for mothers and babies. And I think that the reason why we have music is because of this emotional bond and this interaction between mother and child. Even excluding lullabies, which parents sing to infants, human mothers and infants under 6 months of age engage in ritualized sequential behaviors. Whoa, ritualized and sequential. I floss my teeth before I brush my teeth before I go to bed. That's sequential. Is it ritualized? Yeah. But these mothers and infants, they have a ritualized sequential behavior involving vocal, facial, and bodily interactions. Using face-to-face mother-infant interactions filmed at 24 frames per second, researchers have shown that mothers and infants jointly construct mutually improvised interactions in which each partner tracks the actions of the other. Okay, so they're looking at each other, they're mimicking each other. Such episodes last from 1/2 second to 3 seconds and are composed of musical elements. There are variations in pitch, rhythm, timbre, volume, and tempo. So this, passage B says, hey, look at mothers and infants. They're singing to each other all the time. What evolutionary advantage would such behavior have? Well, I don't know. Again, with the rhetorical question, Darwin apparently was puzzled. You say it's indispensable for mothers. But yeah, you haven't yet told me why it's indispensable for mothers. Just because they do it, does that mean, why is that indispensable? What evolutionary benefit could there have been? And passage B says, in the course of hominid evolution, brain size increased rapidly. Contemporaneously, the increase in bipedality, that is walking on 2 feet, caused the birth canal to narrow. This resulted in hominid infants being born ever more prematurely, leaving them much more helpless at birth. Ooh, okay. So mothers start walking, the birth canal gets narrower, and all of a sudden babies are getting born like totally helpless. Weird, huh? This helplessness necessitated longer, better maternal care. What's this have to do with music again? Under such conditions, the emotional bonds created in the pre-musical mother-infant interactions we observe in Homo sapiens today, that's that mimicking each other, cooing to each other. The passage B is calling that pre-musical. If we observe that, behavior whose neurological basis essentially constitutes the capacity to make and enjoy music would have conferred considerable evolutionary advantage. Huh. I'm not I'm not sure that I really understand why you think it's such an evolutionary advantage. I mean, you're saying mothers and babies do it to each other all the time. And then there's this thing about infants were really helpless. And because infants became helpless, therefore we needed more parental interaction, more care was needed. And somehow this musical communication between infant and child emerged and is also critical. I don't know. I'm still confused as to why it would be necessary, but this author says, well, it's something to do with moms and babies need to take care of each other for a long time, or babies need to be taken care of by moms for a long time. And that's where this musical relationship developed. And it is a critical, necessary thing that would have been preferred by evolution, according to you. Now, Passage A would totally disagree, right? Passage A is like, yeah, I don't get it either. We definitely have language because we need that. Natural selection says you've got to be able to communicate with each other. That's why we have language. And music just happened to come along in, 8% of us that can carry a tune or whatever it is. That would be Passage A's point of view. Passage B is going to definitely take issue with that because they think that there's some critical, necessary relationship involving music between mothers and infants. I'm going to answer number 13, and then I'm going to work my way through a couple more questions, and then I'm going to open it up to you guys to ask whatever questions you might have. Again, thank you for being here. Happy that you're giving LSAT Demon a shot. I think that it is the best LSAT prep money can buy. And I hope to see you in our live classes, or sign up as a basic or premium subscriber if you want to do more of a self-study type of a program with access to the ask button. You can still use the ask button all the time. Sign up for live if you want to come to live classes. I really think that 1 month of live would blow your mind if you gave it a shot. Come to all of our classes and ask all the questions you want for a month. I think there's a huge value there. Sorry for the sales pitch. Number 13. Which one of the following principles underlies the arguments in both passages? So both passages, Passage A and Passage B, what were they both? What were they both about? Well, they were both trying to explain why we have music. Passage A is like, yeah, I think music evolved at the same time as language, but I don't really know why we have music. Seems to be kind of an accident. Passage B says, why do we have music? Well, and then Passage B goes into an explanation that I didn't really buy about mothers and infants. Maybe they're totally right. I'm just saying it sounded sketchy to me. I didn't really follow why it would be necessary. I understand that mothers and infants are doing that, and I understand that mothers need to pay attention to infants, but I don't understand why music is necessary. Why can't they just be talking or communicating, baby talking? Or I don't know. I just don't know why it had to be music. So I didn't really buy the point of Passage B. But they were both trying to figure out why music exists. What is possibly the evolutionary basis for our capacity for music? So is it A, investigations of the evolutionary origins of human behaviors must take into account the behavior of non-human animals? What? No way. Neither passage was talking about, hey, if we're going to study ourselves, we really need to understand the orangutans. That's just not what they were saying, so I can't pick A. B, all human capacities can be explained in terms of the evolutionary advantages they offer. Not so fast. Both passages were trying to understand the evolutionary advantages offered by music. That does not mean that both passages would have to take the position that, that all human capacities can be explained in terms of evolutionary advantages. Matter of fact, Passage A explicitly seems to disagree with it, because Passage A said, hey, I think we got language by accident, and if you'll notice, not everyone can even do it. So I don't think that Passage A would have to agree that all human capacities can be explained, because I don't think Passage A really attempted to explain music. Passage A just said, yeah, it's an accident. Music doesn't have any evolutionary advantage. I can't pick B. C, the fact that a single neurological system underlies two different capacities is evidence that those capacities evolved concurrently. Passage A said that. Passage A was looking at the neurological similarities and saying, therefore, they must have evolved together. Passage B just did not reason from neurological structures to they must have evolved at the same time. That's just not a leap that passage B made. D, the discovery of the neurological basis of a human behavior constitutes the discovery of the essence of that behavior. Whoa, is that a weird answer? Passage A, I believe it said something about the essence of something or other, but I could be wrong about that. What did it? Or was it in passage B? I remember one, I thought I had remembered a strange phrase that happened to mention essence. But if I just consider the meaning of D, D says if I can figure out the neurological basis for a human behavior, then I have discovered the essence of that behavior. I just don't know what you mean. What would it mean to discover the essence of a behavior? I don't know. So that makes me uncomfortable because I just don't think that that was really what either passage was talking about. E, the behavior of modern day humans can provide legitimate evidence concerning the evolutionary origins of human abilities. I can see why this is such a tricky question for people. E is not what I predicted. But it is something that both passage A and passage B did. Passage A and passage B presented evidence about modern day humans. So, passage B is studying mothers talking to babies. Passage A is studying, it's doing brain imaging on music and language on modern day humans. So passage A and passage B are both rooted in studies or information about modern day humans, and both passage A and passage B are searching for the evolutionary reason why is it that we evolved this capacity for music. And yeah, studying modern day humans because that's all we have. So the answer is E. Both passage A and passage B did what E is describing. If that's as hard as they're going to get, which I think that is as hard as they're going to get since 56% of the class asked for it. If that's as hard as they're going to get, I think we can manage this stuff. Because I can't see myself picking any of those wrong answers. I think that if you read them carefully enough, if you read the passages carefully enough, and if you read the answers carefully enough, you'll realize that it just wasn't true that both passages were talking about A or B or C or D. But when we get to E, you can realize, oh yeah, okay, maybe not what I predicted, but you're right. Both passages were talking about that issue. I'm going to do number 14, and then I will just open it up to any question. Number 14 says, which one of the following most accurately characterizes a relationship between the two passages? Passage A and B use different evidence to draw divergent, which also means different. So did they use different evidence to draw a different conclusion? Yeah, they did. They did, because passage A was, doing brain imaging studies of musicians and people talking. That's one type of evidence. Passage B was like studying mothers and infants together. So that's two different types of evidence. Passage A said, I think music evolved accidentally. Passage B said, I think music evolved because mothers and infants critically needed to be able to communicate in this way. So yeah, they did talk about different evidence. They did draw divergent conclusions, and the answer is going to be A. B, passage A poses the question that passage B attempts to answer. No. Passage B actually is answering a different question. Passage B is more like, why did music evolve? Passage A was first started with, did they originate together? And then tried to answer the question, why did music evolve? and they eventually arrived at a different conclusion from passage B. But it wasn't like passage A was posing the question and then passage B was answering it. Passage A was providing answers of its own. C, passage A proposes a hypothesis that passage B attempts to substantiate with new evidence. No, passage B is not trying to substantiate. Substantiate means to support. And passage B actually arrives at a different conclusion. They're not at all trying to substantiate the conclusion of passage A. They're arriving at an opposite conclusion. That's why we're picking A, not C. D, passage A expresses a stronger commitment to its hypothesis than does passage B. I don't think so. They both seemed pretty sure. I can't really say that passage A was somehow more strident or no. E, passage A and B use different evidence to support the same conclusion. No, they arrived at different conclusions. And that's why the answer is A. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm going to take us off the record to see if you have any last-minute questions.